You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Well, hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to the Unwritable Rant podcast, episode 105. Y'all, I got bourbon in my hands. Hopefully you do too. Either way, grab a glass, fill it up, and let's say cheers. Oh my, this is some tasty bourbon. It is a limited edition, so I'm not quite sure how readily available it is, but I gotta say, this is tasty stuff. I had had the Redemption High Rye bourbon a while back, and I was really pleasantly surprised by it. So when I saw this wheated release, I knew I had to give it a try because I am a huge fan of wheated bourbons. Now, here's what sets this one apart from some of the others, like Maker's Mark. This one has a much higher wheat count. So it's 51% corn, 45% winter wheat, and 4% malted barley. And oh, y'all, this is a silky, lovely kind of bourbon. It's a little sweet like honey, but also toasted and totally nutty. And the more you drink it, the more the finish comes forward, and it's just spicy and lingering. I love this Redemption wheated bourbon. Well, it would seem as though it is officially back to school time. And in thinking about it, I can't say that I have ever been a particularly good student. I mean, that's not to say that I got bad grades. I mean, really, it's quite the contrary. I think it's just that most of my teachers really disliked me because I was obstinate and kind of lazy and prone to making my own rules. So they would begrudgingly give me A's, mostly because I gave them no choice otherwise. Well, except for that one time when I flunked music appreciation. You see, I had certain expectations of my teachers in college. The foremost being that they must be more knowledgeable than I am in a given subject. And believe me, I know the areas where I'm an idiot. Like math. I am such a dimwit when it comes to numbers that in order to meet my core math requirement in college, I had to take basic algebra from the football coach. It was known as football math, and it was spread out over 2 entire semesters, just to ensure that the football team could maintain their GPA and they wouldn't miss out on any games. I was the only non-football player in that class. Now, my second expectation was that professors actually had to teach. See, here's the thing. I wasn't exactly thrilled about having to go to college at all. If I had my way, I would have been on the first highway I could find to Los Angeles. Now, of course, in hindsight, I know that would have resulted with me likely face down and withering on a pile of dirty hairband flyers on Sunset Boulevard. So college it was. And for my 4 years, I essentially considered my courses unavoidable interludes between my budding gigs as a rock writer. Not that I wasn't up for learning things that could improve my chances of career success. And that's why I deliberately took music appreciation in my junior year as an elective. I wasn't looking for a blow-off class. I genuinely wanted to learn and evaluate. I wanted to understand what music was all about and be able to critique it in a formal, structured way. Unlike my album reviews, which were often overly critical and highly biased. I went into that class not just with an open mind, but with enthusiasm, which is more than I can say that I brought to that football math class. My first clue that my expectations were a tad too high came the very first day of class. The instructor walks into the room and she plugs in not a stereo, not a phonograph, but a television. And over the course of the next 10 weeks, that TV became our teacher of sorts. You see, as we quickly learned, our actual professor knew nothing about music. So she relied on PBS specials from the 60s to instill in us what she called an appreciation of world music. Of course, the only connection that some of these specials had to music was the stock backing tracks. Were this 5th grade, I would have been overjoyed to do nothing but watch TV. But this was a college class. I wanted to learn something, not waste my time with TV programs that were typically broadcast around 2 a.m. between infomercials for Solaflex and spray-on hair. So I was pissed. There were no discussions about music, no interpretation or analysis, just PBS. I debated dropping the class. I did. But me being me, I decided that wasn't enough of a statement. I wanted this woman to know just how displeased I was with her and her utter lack of music education. If I was going to be miserable in that class, so was she. And I set out to make the next 8 weeks of class as uncomfortable as possible. A typical class would start with me calling out something like, "Hey, Mozart." Oh yeah, I deliberately called her Mozart. How do you tune a sitar? It was a little game I liked to play called Stump the Instructor, with the main goal being to demonstrate just how little she knew. Sometimes the questions would be simple, like, what instrument did Louis Armstrong play? Other times, they were a little more complex, like when I asked her to list the notes in an arpeggio for the chord of C major going up 2 octaves. Either way, her answers to my asshole edition of Trivial Pursuit were always the same, just with varying levels of exasperation. She'd look at me, roll her eyes, and just insist that I sit there, shut up, and watch the video. Oh, and did I ever! Each class, I would show up with an economy-sized bag of popcorn, a 2-liter bottle of soda that I'd swill without a cup, and a large box of movie theater candy that I would frequently rattle around during boring parts of the videos, which was pretty much the entire length of them. I even started showing up to class with a teddy bear and a blanket. During especially lively musical interludes, I would make the bear dance on my desktop. No one in the class knew exactly what to make of me, but they weren't especially surprised at my antics either. You see, they all knew my dad. My dad was the department chair of Computer and Information Science at the college I attended. And if I am completely honest, I may not have had the lady balls to be quite as bold in my disapproval of this class if I didn't have him as backup. Not that I expected him to bail me out of trouble or anything like that. I was absolutely prepared to accept whatever consequences came. I just liked that his reputation as something of an eccentric preceded me. I mean, my dad was the guy who knocked out all of the power in his building when he brought his Tesla coil to school. He was also the same guy who managed to convince an entire master's level artificial intelligence class that he had a pet duck, just to prove a point about what people will believe. So there was literally no stunt that I could pull in my music appreciation class that would even begin to rival my dad's penchant for trouble. So, when I showed up one day with a mini Casio keyboard and serenaded the class with a pre-programmed bossa nova, I had all the confidence of a person who has truly stopped giving a fuck. That one earned me a private conference with the instructor. She started the conversation by asking, "What the hell is your problem?" And then she ended it by pleading with me to drop her class. No fucking way. I was young, full of myself, and out to prove a point. So I continued to show up 3 days a week for the entire term, just to make an ass out of both of us. I'd get to class early and leave inspirational quotes about music teachers on the board. And when it came time for exams, I turned my Scantron forms into sheet music. Do y'all remember those things? They required a number 2 pencil and a complete lack of analysis, relying instead on filling in little multiple-choice circles. They made the perfect grid for an array of music notes and symbols. But my final act of rebellion? Y'all, it was beautiful. It came in the form of my term paper. Now, we were assigned to write 3 to 5 pages on the benefits that music has on society. This was obviously her way of trying to add validity to 10 weeks of nothing but PBS specials. But I wasn't about to play that game. Instead, I wrote a little fable about a woman who cons a town into paying her to teach guitar to its residents, despite not being able to play herself. She tries to skip town before the big recital, but is caught by a young, cunning journalist who, rather than turn her in, forces her to watch the entire Guitar Method in the Style Of series from Kurt Mitchell. Side note, have y'all ever seen this? It's priceless. Needless to say, my term paper did not go over particularly well with her. My grade was sealed, and it was a big day when I got my report card. There, sandwiched between 2 A's, was my F. The first I had ever received, and oh wow, was it satisfying. That was one grade I truly earned. Theoretically, I could have lodged a formal grade complaint, because based on the grading scale in Mozart's syllabus, the fact that I had attended every class and turned in a term paper technically gave me enough points to earn a D. But why bother? It was never about the grade, it was about the protest. And even if it meant adding a 4th class to my course load the following semester, making my point was priceless. At my college, students were asked to fill out teacher evaluations at the end of every term. I left mine blank for music appreciation. I figured I'd done the instructor enough mental damage that ruining her career would be pushing my luck. Besides, she did just fine doing that on her own. My dad later told me that her contract wasn't renewed when the administration found out that she had falsified the experience on her resume. Now that was music worth appreciating. And now I'm going to have a little bit more bourbon. Hang on, y'all. Oh, this Redemption is heavenly. Y'all, if you see a bottle of Redemption Wheated Bourbon, buy all of it. That is what I'm going to do. I am running out to the liquor store after this, and I am swooping up every bottle I can find. That being said, I do want to provide a little bit of clarification regarding my musical education, because I don't want to be misleading. The truth is, my music education was not entirely innocent. I know, I've made a whole lot of statements about being the utmost professional when it came to my career as a rock writer. But I'll tell you, you don't just walk onto the music scene as a young writer and immediately know that it is a bad idea to touch the musicians. Like you know at the zoo it's a bad idea to dangle a cheeseburger over the alligator pen. You have to make mistakes, sometimes big ones, to learn the kind of lessons they just don't teach in school. I started writing about rock and roll when I was 15 for 2 very specific reasons. One genuine and one less so. I wanted to share my love of music with like-minded people, and I wanted to get closer to the people, strike that, the oh-so-attractive and enticing stars who made it. And of course, the two were inextricably linked. And let me be very clear, lest you get the same idea that my high school classmates did. I worked my ass off to get interviews and assignments. I started with smaller regional bands, moved on to mid-level touring bands, and eventually the rock stars that I admired. Still, I did not have the movie Almost Famous to guide me. So unfortunately, on one of my very first assignments with a bigger name rock band that I will call Whisker Licking, I completely and totally lost my mind and my virginity. I swear to God, we need to start a drinking game where y'all take a shot every time I try to rationalize something distasteful by saying, well, it was a different time back then. But it truly was. Virginity wasn't exactly something many people cherished. In fact, most everyone I knew managed to ditch theirs in their early teens. I probably held on to mine slightly longer than my friends, not for lack of opportunity or some absurd notion of romance, but because I didn't want to waste the moment on some dumb, inexperienced high school kid. I hadn't been consciously saving myself for a rock star, but looking back, it certainly was fitting. When I saw that Whisker Licking was coming to town, I put in a request for an interview without really thinking I'd get it. The band at the time was huge. They had 2 singles that were dominating MTV and radio, and they were about to embark on their first headlining tour. Which actually wound up working in my favor. The record label wanted to get the word out that the band was on the road and bigger than ever. Maybe pick up some bigger venues along the way, and I just happened to cover the right market. So when that call came in with my assignment, I let out a shriek. I'd be interviewing the band before their show at a large arena, and I'd have 2 tickets and 2 photo passes waiting for me at the will call window. To this point in my journalistic career, my dad had been going on most of my interview assignments with me. He'd pose as my photographer and generally try to blend into the walls and not come off as dad-like, but still being on guard to break up any potentially threatening situations. He certainly was an effective watchdog, and Lord knows how many cocks he blocked. But with Whisker Lickin', I knew it was time to cut my dad loose. This was one interview I wanted to handle on my own. No backup, no limitations, just me. And, of course, 4 musicians not exactly renowned for being upstanding guys. Being not quite legal myself, this required a little bit of subterfuge. So I turned to the greatest misadventure cover-up known to teenagers: the overnight. Every teenager I knew had that one friend, with parents less involved than their own, that they would always call when they wanted to get away with something. For me, it was my gay friend Mark. We'd been friends since grade school, and the second he got his driver's license, the 2 of us were crossing the border to drink at shitty dive bars under the guise of going to school dances and pep rallies. His parents were filthy rich and completely oblivious. My own parents were ridiculously open-minded. So once they confirmed the fact that Mark was indeed 100% gay, and that there was a spare bedroom for me in his family's estate, they had no trouble letting me spend entire weekends with him. And you know, even with all the planning and the scheming that I had to undertake to make this interview happen on my own terms, I swear, I had no intentions of betting any of the band. I just wanted to be alone with them. To give you an idea of just how ridiculously naive I was, my big fantasy for the evening was being able to go out to dinner with them. That's where my head was. So, when the band's drummer handed me his hotel room key, an actual key attached to a plastic key ring with a room number on it, and suggested that he interview me later, I was blown away. Everything to that point had been perfect. Mark and I made it to the concert without any issue, and our parents were none the wiser. The band was charming and funny, and they humored all of my awful amateur interview questions. And then there was the drummer. He wasn't especially bright, but what he lacked in smarts he more than made up for with a head of gorgeous long wavy brown hair, a heart-stopping smile, and, apparently, an interest in me. I was so frankly clueless and unprepared for that moment, I accepted the key with a smile, actually believing I was something special. Throughout the band's show that night, I kept tight hold on that key. Girls were frothing and throwing panties on stage, all intently lusting for the very guy I had a direct key to. Had I wanted to, I totally could have used that key to wage the most epic groupie battle the world has ever seen. I could have auctioned it off like vintage Tiffany and made a small fortune. But no, I just let it sit in my pocket, a silent but tingly reminder that I would not be ending the day the same way I started. Mark was absolutely tickled to death to be playing accomplice to my deflowering. He gave me a perverse pep talk on the ride to the hotel, cautioning me against using my teeth and offering a few creative moves he'd picked up in his modest experience having gay sex. As for me, I was still trying to wrap my head around what was going to happen. My experience was essentially everything but, so it's not like I was going into this situation entirely green. Still, this was it. It, with a capital I and T, with a guy whose poster still had a place of honor right next to my bed. The hotel was packed with gobs of girls, all looking a little haggard but hopeful they'd catch sight of the band. Mark rolls his eyes when he sees the scene and promises he'll wait in the lobby for me all night if need be. He then slips a rumpled condom into my back pocket and sends me off in sacrifice to the hairband gods. And I'll be honest, y'all, I almost turned around. Several times. As I walked the length of the hallway to Drummer Boy's room, what-ifs and why-me's danced around in my head in a sultry panic. Drummer Boy's keyring was wet from my sweaty palms as I fumbled with it at his door. Should I knock first? What do? Do I just go in? And what the hell would be waiting for me on the other side? Y'all, I have walked into a lot of hotel rooms and been greeted by sights that run the gamut from underwhelming to all-out terrifying. What I found in Drummer Boy's room fell somewhere in the middle. The king of my then fantasies, the godlike rock star figure I'd worshipped from afar, he was stretched out on his bed, wearing nothing but green-striped bikini underwear. His only company? A large bag of half-eaten Cheetos. Oh, that guy knew how to party. I suppose Cheetos were far better than finding him snorting coke off the ass of one of the lobby whores. Still, it was unnerving to see him stripped of the leather pants and elaborate drum kit and looking so ordinary. He welcomed me in and offered me some of his cheesy snack, which was gentlemanly enough, I suppose, but I was so nervous and so internally freaking out at the situation I was in, I had the world's worst case of dry mouth. I desperately scanned the room for something, anything to drink, but I was interrupted by Drummer Boy pawing the back of my head. I turned to look at him, and he responds by shoving his cheese-dusted tongue into my parched mouth. This presented me with a bit of a not-so-sexy conundrum. Do I pause the kissing and suggest that we hydrate? Or do I continue to let him drag his tongue through my mouth like a salty orange snail on sand? I was still too in awe of this guy and too excited at the prospect of ditching my virginity, I didn't say a goddamn word. Not even when he left little cheesy fingerprints on my white shirt, and not even when we rolled over and I had the damn bag of Cheetos lodged under my back. The only sound I made, beyond the requisite oohs and ahs, was to ask if he had a condom. And he did. He rolled that thing on, jammed into me for 5, maybe 7 thrusts, Cheetos crushing the entire time, and was done. If he had any indication that it was my first time, he didn't let on. He just pulled out, slipped the condom off, and flung it across the room where it landed in the corner with a pronounced splat. That is what all the fuss was about. That is what sex was. I was confused, relieved, and still a little bit excited. And oddly, Drummer Boy wanted to hang out and chat afterwards. He asked some questions about my life, neglecting to ask anything that might reveal my age, of course, and told me a few stories about his time on the road. And goddamn it, if I didn't start to fall for that moron in the hour I spent talking with him afterward. If he had just booted me out the door, I could have written the entire experience off for what it was. Oh, y'all. I completely misinterpreted his interest, left him my phone number, and had the belief he would actually use it. I floated down to the lobby on a cloud of cheesy pixie dust. Mark took one look at my stained shirt and tangled hair and burst out laughing. Oh, honey, he said, let's get you cleaned up so you can walk out of here properly. The few lobby whores left eyed me with envy, but I was too jazzed to care. Sure, the sex had been completely awful, but I was confident that Drummer Boy liked me. Well, I was, until a month passed and he hadn't called me. I went through every conceivable emotion I did, and my ultimate girl rationalization was that he was just too busy on the road to call. Fortunately, I had resources, and I was able to start quasi-stalking this band. I got a list of all of their upcoming gigs from their PR chick, and I dragged poor Mark off to every show they played in the tri-state area. I ultimately caught up with Drummer Boy somewhere outside of Peoria about 5 months later. I had finangled meet-and-greet passes to the show, and I stood there, waiting for him anxiously, bag of Cheetos in my hand like a fucking puppy. And there he was, standing there in the doorway, choir of angels singing, and he catches sight of me, and he smiles. And then he walks through an entire horde of groupies as if I am the only person in the room. My heart totally stopped, and I think, oh my God, he's happy to see me. He gives me a quick hug, and I offer the junk food up in tribute. Again, Drummer Boy smiles, flashing teeth the size of tombstones at me, and he says, oh, my favorite. How did you know? It is here that I realize Drummer Boy is not happy to see me. He's happy to see the Cheetos. He has absolutely no fucking idea who I am. Oh, I was too humiliated to say anything. Again. And I played the whole thing off as low-key as I could. But that night, I went home and I sobbed. It was awful, heartbreaking, horrible, the worst ordeal ever. But I will tell you this much. I ultimately got over it, and I learned 2 very harsh but essential lessons. 1, I'm not that special. And 2, neither are these dumbass rock stars. And with that, I am lifting up my glass and I am toasting to every single bad first-time experience we've ever had. Cheers, y'all. Bourbon. Well, y'all, before I let you go, I just want to remind you that if you are looking for a new podcast to listen to, check out Podern Family on Twitter. Just search for #PodernFamily, and you will find a collection of fantastic podcasts just waiting to be listened to. Whatever you like, I am sure you will find a podcast to suit that taste. I'm in there too, don't forget. And if you are so inclined, head on over to iTunes and leave me a review. I'd really appreciate it. So thanks for listening, y'all. I'm going to head out and find myself some more bourbon. Hope you all have a great week. I'll be back to chat with you again next. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter @MorningNeurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, a couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton lane. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.